I think that Biden is going to surprise us. He surprised me when.
Philosopher, intellectual, and activist Cornel West was on CNN International and gave his thoughts on how Joe Biden has surprised him so far, but was also clear to not give him too much credit either. So I'm going to play this and discuss it.
You were not a supporter of Joe Biden when he ran for the president. You supported Bernie Sanders. Now that we're 100 days into the Biden administration, have you revised your assessment of him and maybe think that he could be a little bit like Lyndon Baines Johnson and surprise us, especially on the issue of race?
I think that Biden is going to surprise us. He surprised me when he went in. My view was that he was tied to 4 crimes against humanity. Mass incarceration, unleashing Wall Street greed with the Glass-Steagall Act repeal, with the invasion and occupation of Iraq, and Israeli occupation. All of those he would not say a critical word about in any substantive way. And in many ways, he was the architect and supporter of them. In coming into office, he hits the issue of Yemen and Afghanistan head on. Relief bill, infrastructure bill. Deeply concerned about police brutality, talks about white supremacy, talks about Jim Crow. He reminds me very much of LBJ, who started as a white supremacist from Jim Crow, Texas, and ended up one of the major forces for good against white supremacy. That's why you never give up on people. You never know which way they're headed. You never know what kind of change they can put forward. If Biden continues in this way, he's going to be very much like LBJ and will be a much stronger force for good against white supremacy on the ground than Barack Obama was. Now, Barack Obama had the symbol because he's brilliant, he's black, he's poised and so forth. Didn't have the courage, didn't have the willingness to fight that Biden does when it comes to this issue, when it comes to a variety of issues. So who would know, who would think that Joseph Biden of Scranton, Pennsylvania, could become such a force for good for progressives? Now, I still have criticisms until he hasn't moved on the Middle Eastern issue the way I would like. And in relation to what's going on in Haiti right now, I'm very critical in terms of the dictatorial rule and his unwillingness to call it into question. So there's a number of things I continue to put pressure on, and I will continue to put pressure on any elected official, no matter what color. But it's always in the name of moral and spiritual issues linked to spreading Hesed to the most vulnerable in any society.
Now, I think this raises a very interesting question. How do you judge a president? Do you judge a president based on your expectations of them, what you expect of them, and if they exceed that? Or do you judge them based on what is required of them in the moment? Because Cornel West here appears to be judging Biden, for at least most of this clip, appears to be judging him based on his low expectations of Biden. So in that sense, yes, I think most people, if you're being objective, you would be surprised by what Biden has done as Joe Biden. But in terms of meeting the moment, clearly he's not there. Medicare for all, not there. Raising the wage to $15 an hour, he says he wants to do it, but they could have overruled the parliamentarian to get it through. They didn't do that. There are a number of more structural issues in America, criminal justice, defunding the police. Biden's not there. There are structural issues that need to be addressed that Biden simply has not addressed, not even rhetorically. Now, that said, there is power in rhetoric. There is symbolism and rhetoric does matter, does have an impact, but it only has so much of an impact. The actual impact is the policy, is what is actually done to help people in their daily lives, to improve their material conditions. Biden is simply not there. I mean, we're a few months into this. So yes, you can be impressed by the American Rescue Plan, even though the checks were smaller than what they were supposed to be, but still it had the an improved child tax credit that essentially became a universal basic income if you have children. And they're now trying to extend that as well. It lowered costs, premium, healthcare premiums for most Americans. So it had a number of provisions in it that were solid, but still we're talking about tinkering around the edges. So I think it's important. Well, I agree with what a lot of what Cornel West is saying here, or the sentiment that he has here. It's important to also, step back and realize what actually matters. And what actually matters is the president meeting the moment? You can judge a man based on what you expect of him, but that only takes you so far. Biden should be held to a higher standard, that higher standard being what he actually should be doing. Because the reality is, as much as Biden may have moved on some of these issues, or at least his rhetoric has moved, he's never going to become a Bernie Sanders. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't hold him to that standard, a standard that you would hold Bernie Sanders to, or that you would hold any president to in terms of what you should expect of them in the moment. So while I understand what Cornel West is saying here, I hope there's still, and he does, to be fair, critique Biden, critique his history, discusses how Biden still is not meeting his expectations on a number of issues. That's good. But also it's important that we don't become too complacent and just accept this Joe Biden that we have because he's better than what we expected. Just because he's better than what we expected doesn't mean that he's to the point in terms of where he should be in meeting the moment. And by the way, I forgot to mention filibuster reform. I mean, none of this is getting done without filibuster reform or getting rid of the filibuster. So ultimately it's all just rhetoric, talking points until the mechanisms are in place to actually get any of what he promised in that joint session of Congress, in that speech. None of it's getting passed until you have those mechanisms in place.